The notification chime on Maya Torres's phone started as a hiccup in the quiet of her kitchen. 3 tones, then a fourth, like a Morse code that didn't know what it wanted to say. The source was an email from a burner account. No subject, no signature, just a single line. There was a second box on the seabed. Attached, a blurred photo of what looked like an orange cylinder the size of a canteen, tagged with a white label stamped QAR. Maya blinked, heart thudding. She had spent 5 years reporting aviation beats for the Beacon Ledger, long enough to know that airplanes didn't just have black boxes, they had 2, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. But a QAR, a quick access recorder, was maintenance hardware, meant to be pulled easily on the ground, not hauled from the ocean floor. Except the photo showed barnacles, scratches, long filaments of seagrass. Salt had bitten into the metal like old guilt. She poured black coffee she wouldn't drink and stared at the metadata. The image clock said it was captured 9 days after the crash of AmeriSky Airlines Flight 271, the domestic evening hop from Miami to New York that had not arrived on March 12, 2011. 72 souls gone. The official report had been swift by federal standards. Spatial disorientation after a cascading instrumentation failure. Tragic, mechanically vague, closed. Maya scrolled further. Another attachment. A redacted shipping manifest with a crate marked AS-271 Recovery, Unit C, and a destination to a private warehouse in Norfolk. Not to the evidence lab, not to the federal docket. Her screen threw a pale rectangle across her face, and behind the glow, she heard the remembered hush of the victim's vigil she had covered years ago. The candles, the names read, the grandmother whose hand shook as she tied a paper crane to a grove fence. She should forward this to her editor. She should confirm the image, test it for manipulation. What she did instead was call the number buried at the bottom of a long-dead FOIA thread. A retired crash investigator who had once told her at a conference, "Truth isn't what you find, it's what you can prove you found." "Daniel Klein," a man rasped into the phone after 2 rings. "This is Torres," she said. "I have a picture you need to see." Silence, then a low whistle. "If you've got a third recorder, you've got a problem, Maya. And if someone meant for you to find it, you've got 2. She emailed it while he stayed on the line. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice had lost its gravel, everything suddenly clean. "That's a QAR barrel, not certified for crash survivability. It should never have seen the bottom of the Atlantic. Then why does it look dredged?" "Because someone took it with them when they went down," he said. "Or someone took it after they brought the others up." Maya's refrigerator hummed to life. Traffic sighed outside her apartment. Somewhere a neighbor laughed. In the banal texture of life, a single thread had been tugged, taut with possibility and danger. She looked again at the white label, half a cereal, half peeled. The photo trembled between pixels. "Daniel," she asked, "what happens if a QAR records things nobody expects?" "That depends," he said, "on whether those things were supposed to be heard." Maya closed her eyes. She saw a corridor of press conferences, polite condolences, the same careful nouns. She opened them to the QAR's indifferent orange. If there was a second box, then the first story was incomplete, and incomplete had a way of masquerading as finished. "Meet me tomorrow," she said, "and bring whatever you kept that they told you to forget." The last passenger to board AmeriSky 271 was a violinist named Jonah Rowe, who had tucked his instrument under the armrests like a sleeping pet. Flight attendant Celeste Park had smiled as she passed, tapping the seat back with the practiced cheer she used to make time behave. In row 21, a boy in a Mets cap pressed his face to the glass, fogging New York into a dream he could walk into just by blowing on it. Captain Reed Ferris and First Officer Lila Chen taxied through a faint drizzle that turned runway lights into softened beads. In the tower, an air traffic controller hummed an old soul record under his breath. The ordinary texture of departure stitched itself, one procedure to the next. At 8:13 p.m., AmeriSky 271 rotated, wheels tucked away. Miami fell like a string of pearls into the dark. The ocean received the airplane the way a stage receives a dancer, emptily, with nothing but air to move through and trust. 10 minutes in, the first anomaly arrived as a flicker on the engine instrument display. An oil pressure blip that corrected itself. "Transient," Chen said, marking it. Ferris nodded, steady. They listened to the aircraft's language the way parents listen to a child cough, alert to pitch, fear muted by habit. At 8:29 p.m., the autopilot burped off with a bleep, a chirp of caution. Chen verified modes. The screen showed cross-checking disagreement between attitude references. Left said a fraction climb, right said level flight. "We've got an IRU KG," she said. Ferris breathed out, slow. They shifted to raw data, as trained, hands light. Miami Center cleared them to continue. The sky outside looked benign, stars pinned like sequins, but thin cirrus layered the horizon. In the cabin, Celeste poured ginger ale and joked about turbulence being God's high five. At 8:34 p.m., a second chime. The primary flight display on Ferris's side hiccuped into a roll indication that didn't match the world. Chen's showed normal. They used the standby. "You have controls," Ferris said, moving his hands away. "Trust as choreography." The aircraft drifted 5 degrees left, corrected. Their voices on the cockpit tape would later sound like musicians finding a rhythm by ear in a bar where the piano's been tuned by a poet. At 8:41 p.m., the nose pitched subtly, then corrected. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Celeste secured her galley. Jonah squeezed his violin case. The boy in the Mets cap asked his father if clouds ever had real names. At 8:46 p.m., a faint salt smell bled into the cabin air. The way ocean sometimes sneaks into pressurized memory, it meant nothing. It meant everything to one woman in 14C whose husband had drowned years before. She pressed her knuckles together. The universe went on not caring, which is its merciful talent. At 8:51 p.m., as they traversed a cold eddy of air, the standby attitude indicator began lagging, just a breath. Chen felt it in her hands before she saw it, something in the airplane's body language that told her the machine was carrying 2 truths at once. "Let's descend a hair," she said. ATC cleared. Ferris, now pilot monitoring, read the checklist for unreliable instruments. They were steady, training braiding with instinct. The final 2 minutes were a stack of seconds, a blink. The roll disagreement spiked. The nose drifted. The autopilot off. The airplane believed it was right and wrong simultaneously. A slight bank left, unnoticed for 3 long beats, turned into a descending arc that looked graceful until it was fatal. Chen fought for a horizon the glass refused to provide. Ferris called for power, leveled what the instruments lied about, trusted the modest gravity in his inner ear, betrayed by motion and darkness. Over water without ground lights, the sky gives no edge to hold. The last recording from the certified cockpit voice recorder would capture an alarm, and a word no one likes to put in print. In the cabin, a flight attendant lifted her eyes to the ceiling, as if she could push the airplane up with the gaze of 1,000 prayers. The ocean, unruffled, waited. It has waited for every story like this, and it will wait for the next. The wreckage field the next morning was a constellation of familiar and impossible. The official press conference said what press conferences say. Maya Torres had stood at the taped line then, listened, wrote, and went home. She had placed the story in her files, where grief goes to be honored, but not disturbed. She had told herself that closure looks like a binder. Now, years later, a second barrel stared out of her phone with barnacled patience. It had the shape of refusal. Daniel Klein was already waiting when Maya walked into the diner, his coffee untouched, his jacket too neat for a retiree. He slid a folder across the formica. Inside, photocopies of old parts catalogues, annotated with a hand that didn't know how to be anything but careful. QARs live in the avionics bay, he said. They're removable for quick downloads. They are not crash protected like the big boys, so if you find one after a water impact, he lifted his eyebrows. Either the water was kinder than physics, or it wasn't in the bay when the airplane hit. Maya studied the photos. Some QARs looked like lunch pails, some like stubby torpedoes, 1,000 vendor quirks hiding a simple idea: make data easy to grab on the ground. What could be on it? She asked. Everything the airline wants to trend, he said. Parameters for performance. Sometimes audio if the maintenance outfit got creative, cabin mics for rattle hunts, sometimes nothing you care about, sometimes everything you shouldn't have. They drove to a storage address from the manifest. Morningside Logistics, Bay 12. A polite manager named Olivia kept her hands visible, as if truth were a skittish bird. We process third-party freight, she said. We don't look inside. She let them see the intake logs from 2011. There it was. AS 271 Recovery, Unit C, Special Handling. Received 9 days after the crash, transferred 2 days later to a courier they didn't recognize. On the loading dock, Daniel scanned the page again and made a face. Look at the consignee code, he said. It matched an old shell contractor he knew from a separate case, the kind used when agencies and airlines wanted to borrow each other's hands without leaving fingerprints. This never went to an evidence room. Maya's phone buzzed. A new email from the burner. You're close. Check the beacon logs. Attached, a short audio spectrum, a dying beat pattern labeled 37.5 kHz, the acoustic heartbeat of flight recorders. The caption read, 2 ping sources recorded, not 1. Daniel leaned in. If they were hearing 2 pingers in the same grid, that means 2 separate devices broadcasting, 2 black boxes, or a black box and something else, like a QAR rigged with a beacon. Maintenance teams sometimes stash portable beacons when they ferry sensitive devices. It's not SOP, but humans improvise. He looked at her. The question is why someone would do that going into the ocean. They drove to Maya's newsroom, a brick and glass maze that smelled like fatigue and old coffee and the sacredness of deadlines. Her editor, Sloan, met them with folded arms. You're bringing me a ghost, Sloan said after they laid it out. An extra box nobody admits exists, a warehouse nobody remembers, a contractor nobody names, and we're going to accuse who? We don't accuse, Maya said. We ask why a QAR got wet, why its chain of custody went private, why beacon logs show 2 heartbeats. Sloane's eyes softened. She'd lost a cousin in a regional crash once. Journalists carry their grief like stowaways. You'll need more than breadcrumbs, she said. You'll need the oven. She assigned legal to shadow the reporting from day one. If anyone breathes on you wrong, I want to smell it. That night, Maya sat in her apartment with the lights low, audio spectrum displayed like a city skyline on her laptop. The door down the hall shut. Upstairs, someone practiced piano, halting, stubborn. She thought of the violinist Jonah, of the boy in the Met's cap, of all the names she had written once with slow respect. She whispered the flight number aloud and felt the syllables thicken the air. Her phone buzzed again, a text this time. Unlisted number. You won't find it where you think. Start with the hangar. She did not reply. She quietly closed her laptop, slid on shoes, and drove to AmeriSky's maintenance base a town over, where old jets slept with their noses open like surgery patients. A security guard in a glass cube watched her sign in for a midnight tour she had scheduled under a pretext months before. Inside, a maintenance tech named Rohan Patel, her off-the-record guide, led her past racks of avionics like library stacks. QARs live here, he said, patting a metal belly and a training airframe. Always a headache, but you didn't come for a tour. He handed her a photocopy of a work card from March 2011, temporary installation of portable data acquisition unit for AS-271. In the notes, for post-overhaul trend capture, remove at JFK. It never got to JFK, Maya said. Rohan's mouth thinned. Sometimes we do installs because an exec wants numbers fast. Sometimes we do it because that bird has a gremlin. He lowered his voice. 2 days after the crash, someone from corporate security told me to stop asking who signed for the unit. When I said I didn't ask, she said, "Good, keep it that way." Maya photographed the work card. It glinted like a fish under streetlight. She thanked him and walked back into the night air, where the wind smelled of jet fuel and rain. Not unpleasant, just honest. Her phone chimed with a final text. "Careful what you try to prove." The threat sat there, banal in its grammar, chilling in its precision. She drove home with her radio off. The piano upstairs had stopped. The city's low hum filled the car like fog. The next morning, Maya found her apartment door ajar. Inside, nothing was missing. Everything was wrong. A drawer slightly out, a book angled oddly, a manila envelope on her table that she had left under a pile now quietly on top, fat with documents that weren't hers, photocopies of legal memos warning of reputational risk, advisories about limiting discovery exposure, drafts of a public statement that boiled human lives into phrases like regrettable outcome. On the last page, a line in blue ink, if necessary, contain Torres. She photographed everything, then called Sloan and Daniel. Sloan wanted her at the office immediately. Daniel wanted her nowhere predictable. "You're not paranoid if there actually are people," he said. He met her in the lobby with a paperback and a bag. "Novels hollowed for a phone. The bag has a hat. You think I'm in a spy novel? I think you're a woman who's going to embarrass men used to not being embarrassed," he said gently. "They don't like that." At the paper's conference room, Legal slid in sideways, already frowning. A lawyer named Hahn, too polite to be soothing, said, "We are not going to accuse anyone. We will document anomalies. We will ask whether those anomalies merit a reopened docket." "Do dockets reopen?" Maya asked. "Rarely," Hahn said. "But sunlight has an odd effect on closed rooms. They map the reporting like a crime board, QAR photo, warehouse transfer, beacon logs with dual sources, maintenance work card for a portable data unit, the unscheduled visit to her apartment. They added names they could source. Olivia at Morningside, Rohan in maintenance. They added questions they couldn't. Who signed the temporary installation? Who diverted the device? Who ordered the special handling? What did the second ping belong to? Maya suggested a line of inquiry that felt like stealing a key from a guard's belt. The diver logs. Recovery teams maintain their own records, depths, coordinates, times. If beacon technicians noted 2 sources, divers may have 2. Daniel knew a supervisor from back then, a woman named Iris McKee, who had retired to run a dive shop in Wilmington. The call was short. Iris listened. "We were told to focus on the main pinger," she said. "Which we did. Procedure. But I remember there was chatter one afternoon about an odd signal just off-grid. You logged it? Not in what they took," Iris said, a smile audible. "We keep our own notebooks. Last I checked, they were still mine. They drove down the same day in a borrowed car with a temperamental GPS that thought highways were metaphors. Iris's shop smelled of neoprene and salt, and on the wall hung a photo of a diver giving a thumbs up to a turtle that looked unimpressed. Iris was short and indestructible. She produced a ratty notebook from a tin. Her finger traced to an entry. Day 9, secondary faint ping NW, approx. 0.3 enement from CVR homing, not tasked. A small arrow pointed to a scribbled coordinate. "We didn't chase it," she said. "It wasn't ours to chase." "Can we go out there?" Maya asked. "Sure," Iris said. "But if the ocean has taught me anything, it's that she doesn't do reruns." That evening, Back in her hotel, Maya opened the curtain to a square of patient water and dialed Rohan again. The call went to voicemail. She typed a text. "Were you ever asked to install beacons on portable units?" 3 dots appeared, then went away. She slept poorly and woke to a message. Not asked, told. A follow-up arrived 20 seconds later. "We used them when management thought we might need to recover quickly. You realize this implies foreknowledge," Daniel said when she showed him. "Or at least anticipation. Or panic," she said. "Either way, someone expected to go looking." After lunch, Iris took them out in a small boat, the wake laying temporary scars on the surface. They dropped a hydrophone. The headphones delivered only the democracies of sea noise. Shrimp clicks, a ship far away, a hum like the universe's own air conditioning. Maya closed her eyes and tried to imagine the past returning in sound. It did not. Time doesn't care about our journalism. Back on shore, a black SUV idled across the street, too long for coincidence. Iris clocked it. "You've got fans," she said. She tapped the notebook. "You take pictures of this. If someone asks, it fell overboard while I was teaching a class of 10 very clumsy beginners." When Maya returned to her car, a paper waited under the wiper. It was a photocopy of a non-disclosure agreement with her name typed in the blank and a sticky note. "Sign and the noise stops." The signature line had been left empty like a dare. The next week turned inside out. Stories that used to publish in 3 days took a month because legal wanted paragraphs to be notarized by reality itself. Sources who loved the sound of their own secrets ghosted. Old colleagues at AmeriSky answered politely and then changed emails. A package containing a digital voice recorder arrived at Maya's desk with no return address. It held 9 seconds of cabin audio no one should have had, rattle, then a male voice saying, "This isn't right," then a metallic whine. The metadata was scrubbed to the bone. Hahn, the lawyer, refused to let it out of the room. "If this is authentic, it didn't walk out of an evidence locker with a lunch break," he said. "It sailed." Sloan wanted verification. Daniel wanted provenance. Maya wanted to know who had decided the dossier was hers to carry. She set up a meeting with Linda Joe, an avionics engineer who had left AmeriSky after the crash and now taught at a state university decorated with vending machines and serious chalkboards. Linda listened to the clip and frowned. "Hear that?" she said, pointing to the high, thin whine. "Not the engines. That's a pitch consistent with a cheap acoustic beacon. But it's in the cabin audio, which means this recorder, if that's what it is, was close to a beacon. Too close. As in, someone had a beacon in the cabin or the forward bay." "Why would anyone do that?" Linda hesitated. "In 2011, we were flying those birds hard. Management wanted trend data to justify deferring expensive checks. Installing a portable data unit with a beacon for just in case," she shrugged. "I can imagine someone doing it to look responsible. If the worst happened, retrieval would be faster. But attach a beacon to a QAR and you create an object that behaves like a recorder in the water. You also create the temptation to handle it separately. Separately." The word sat like a thumb on a scale. Maya drove home, feeling the strange levity that comes when the outline of a thing emerges. She parked 1 block away and walked the rest. Her apartment door was still. Inside, the envelope of leaked memos had acquired cousins. 2 more envelopes, each with selective documents that created more questions than they answered. Whoever wanted to scare her wasn't trying to make her stop. They were trying to curate her curiosity. At 2 a.m., her phone vibrated. A new burner email. "Warehouse again. Night shift. Ask Olivia for Doc 5 camera tape." March 21st, 2011. The message evaporated after she read it. She grabbed a hoodie and woke Daniel with a text. He met her in the Morningside parking lot, hair angled by sleep. Olivia's eyes were tired but kind. She was done being surprised. I thought we were finished with 2011, she said, unlocking an office that still used beige as a philosophy. The archive room surrendered a tape more fragile than memory. They threaded it into a decrepit player. The black and white footage of March 21, 2011 showed a crate with AS-271 recovery, Unit C being loaded into a van with no logo. The driver stepped out to sign. He wore a jacket. His face turned to the camera for 2 seconds. Daniel leaned in. Maya felt her own breath catch. She knew the face, not personally, but from public testimony after other crashes. He was a liaison often seen between airlines and federal teams, a man whose job was to coordinate. She had never learned what that meant beyond being loved by microphones. "Do we print his name?" Daniel asked. "Not yet," she said. "We need to know what Unit C was. Open the box before you accuse the hand that carried it." They paused the tape. In the lower corner, a timestamp flickered, then glitched, then returned. Daniel rewound. Slow. A frame showed the crate label up close when it tilted. Under Unit C was a smaller sticker. "Return to Trinity Bay Lab." "Private lab," Daniel said, "specializes in component analysis. I've crossed them on propeller cases." He smiled without joy. "They're very good at finding nothing." Maya felt the pressure differential in her chest, the sense of being higher than she'd meant to climb. "Road trip?" she asked. Trinity Bay Lab was a tasteful cube among pines, its signage modest, its security emphatic. They welcomed visitors with coffee and non-disclosure agreements thick enough to wedge a door. Maya signed the visitor log, but not the NDA. Han had given her a sentence to use. "We cannot consent to any restriction on reporting facts observed from public vantage or disclosed by sources outside your custody." It felt like a charm against wolves. A manager named Cole Warwick ushered them to a glassed conference room. He spoke fluent euphemism. "We provide forensic services to a broad client base," he said. "We respect the sensitivity of all matters, especially those involving human loss." "Did you receive a crate labeled AS-271 Recovery, Unit C, on March 21, 2011? Maya asked. Cole's smile did not move. "We don't discuss clients." "Did you ever test a quick access recorder that had been exposed to salt water?" "We test many things." Daniel placed a copy of the warehouse video still on the table, the label visible, the angle accidental, the truth irritable. "If we subpoena logs..." Cole's smile unglued 0.5 millimeter. "Your office can route requests through counsel." He stood. If there's nothing else, there was. In the hallway, a young tech with oil under his nails and an ID badge that said F. Ruiz walked past with a cart. On the cart sat a clear bin labeled Archive 2011-3. Inside, Maya glimpsed a familiar orange, sun-faded, barnacled scars. She looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the exit. Cole followed their eyes and moved to block the view with his own body, professional, weary. "We'll be in touch," Maya said, and meant it. In the car, she exhaled a laugh that wasn't humor. "It's here," she said. "Or it was," Daniel said. "Now that we've spooked them, it could be in a different county by dinner." They called Han, who advised them not to trespass, not to steal, not to be heroes. "Be the press," he said. "Heroes get charged." Maya returned to the hotel to find a polite letter from AmeriSky's legal department threatening an injunction over ongoing harassment and defamation. It cited no specifics, which is a way to show teeth without biting. Sloan conference called, voice calm in a way that made Maya want to cry. "We proceed," she said, "but we do not poke the tiger just to hear it growl. Focus on verifiable process failures." That night, Maya wrote for 6 straight hours. Not a story, but a timeline. The spine of a narrative that could stand in court. March 12th, crash. March 21st, Unit C shipped to Morningside and on to Trinity Bay. Day 9 of search, dual pinger reference in Iris's notebook. Maintenance work card scheduling a portable data unit with beacon for AS-271. She taped index cards to her wall like stars, drew lines, stepped back. The pattern was not yet a constellation, but the lines refused to be random. At 3 a.m., a new email. You will not get a warrant, but you don't need one. Ask for the calibration records. She didn't sleep. At opening, she called Trinity Bay and asked for routine quality certificates for equipment used in 2011. Calibration logs are often public or discoverable in lawsuits. She didn't ask for case specifics. She asked for machines. Cole, surprised, complied. Our practices are exemplary, he said. We have nothing to hide. The logs arrived by afternoon. Maya forwarded to Linda. An hour later, Linda called. Look at the salt immersion tank cycles for March 30th. See the serial noted? It's the QAR model from your photo. Not definitive, but suggestive. Now look at the acoustic chamber runs. They tested a 37.5 cast source marked oak. That's a pinger. Could be anything, Maya said, which is what you say when you want it to be something. Could be, Linda agreed. But put it next to the video and the notebook and the work card, and it begins to sound less like coincidence and more like choreography. Daniel texted a single word. Publish? Maya stared at the screen. The story was big enough to be wrong in 1,000 ways. It needed one more anchor, a piece that turned choreography into confession. It came from a voice she'd been trying to forget since grad school, a soft-spoken baritone who introduced himself as Mark with facilities on a campus where he didn't work. He called from a number that bled into static if she asked it a direct question. You're poking at Trinity Bay, he said. You should, but you're missing the why. Why? She asked. Because the QER had something the airline didn't want public, he said. Not because it was criminal, because it was embarrassing. Who are you? A person who watched a lot of good people do their jobs while one or two tried to decide what truth meant. He proposed a meeting at a park where the trees whistled because city planners had chosen the wrong species for the wind. He was ordinary looking in the way anonymity hopes for. He carried a folded printout and a sadness like luggage. Maintenance teams had been complaining about intermittent attitude reference hiccups on that fleet, he said. AmeriSky wanted trend data to argue for operating extensions. The portable unit captured parameters the standard FDR might not sample at high enough rates. It also recorded a maintenance channel conversation. Someone wired a mic to the forward bay because they were chasing a rattle. On the night of the crash, that mic picked up a line nobody wanted in the news. What line? He handed her the paper, a partial transcript. Timestamps, notation. 20:51:14, male voice, forward bay. Beacon armed. If we go fishing, at least they'll find this one fast. Then a laugh that read as nervous more than cruel. Maya felt heat rise. He didn't mean crash, she said. No, Mark said. He meant if they had to do maintenance over water or a diversion and the unit got pulled, the beacon would save time. But someone would read it as fatalistic, and the airline's comms people had a collective aneurysm. The QAR became a liability. They wanted the data trends, not the sentence. Did federal investigators hear this? Officially, no, he said. Unofficially, I can't say. I can say the device went to Trinity Bay, where engineers who answer to contracts can be persuaded to say a thing drowned unrecoverably. Which it didn't. Do you have the audio? I have a clip, he said, tapping his jacket. You have Iris's note, Rohan's card, the video still, the calibration logs. You have enough to say that a third device existed, that it was handled outside standard chain, and that its existence was elided in the public file. Maya heard the word elided and thought how gentle it was for what it tried to hold. She asked Mark why he'd come now. He looked at the trees. Because it's almost 10 years, he said. Because people are about to retire with good pensions and bad sleep. Because you're careful. He left before she could thank him in a way that would matter. She and Daniel listened to the clip that night in the newsroom with Hahn in the doorway and Sloan at the glass. The line played. The laugh followed, small, human. Hahn rubbed his eyes. "This is not proof of causation," he said. "This is proof of existence. Sometimes that's all a story needs to begin," Sloane said. Maya wrote. She wrote until the newsroom emptied and the city performed its nocturne. She wrote the way a diver breathes. When she finished the draft, her hands shook. The headline was not a verdict, only a question carved with facts. An extra recorder, a private transfer, and 2 pings. Should the AS-271 docket reopen? They sent the story to AmeriSky and Trinity Bay 12 hours before publication with a list of questions any honest party could answer. AmeriSky replied with a statement that had been boiled down to 2 flavors: sorrow and denial. Trinity Bay sent a letter drafted in a font that tried to be expensive, threatening action if defamatory insinuations ran. Hahn wrote back a note so surgical it could have removed their threats through a keyhole. At 9 p.m., Maya received a text from an unknown number. "Injunction hearing at 8 a.m. Courthouse Annex. Ex parte if you oversleep." She forwarded to Hahn, whose reply was a gif of someone running while typing. "We'll be ready," he wrote. "Get some sleep you won't get." In her apartment, Maya lay awake, listening to the refrigerator confess its cycles to the dark. She thought of Jonah's violin, of the boy's Mets cap, of the woman in 14C who hated salt. She thought of the unnamed maintenance tech, whose nervous joke had been turned into a corporate anxiety. She thought of the liaison's face in the camera still, the way competence can be bent toward silence. At 2 a.m., the burner sent one more crumb. "Check docket Appendix B, Rev 1. The revision date doesn't match." She opened the public report PDF, flipped to Appendix B, acoustic search logs. The revision stamp read April 12, 2011 on the cover and April 14th in the footer, 2 days apart, the kind of error bureaucracy makes when someone edits quickly. Not a crime, an artifact, but artifacts are where stories hide. She texted Iris, who replied with a photo of her own copy, the original appendix. The table of pinger detections in Iris's version had a faint extra row at the bottom, faded, then deleted in later publishers. Not a smoking gun, a smolder. Maya added a paragraph to the draft about version control and the ways public documents evolve. At 4 a.m., she dozed in a chair and dreamed she was in the forward bay, listening to beeps that were actually birds, while water folded and unfolded like a patient shirt. She woke to sunlight that felt judgmental. At 8 a.m., in Annex Court, AmeriSky's counsel argued that the story would cause irreparable harm by inviting speculation that the airline had hidden evidence. Hahn stood, and with a competence that felt like grace, explained that the story alleged no such thing. It asked questions supported by documents. The judge, who had seen enough last-minute injunctions to be bored by them, denied. "The remedy for speech," she said, "is more speech." On the courthouse steps, Sloane hugged Maya quick and hard. "Go hit publish," she said. At 10:03 a.m., the Beacon Ledger homepage carried the headline. Within minutes, the story was read in break rooms and kitchens and on trains where people forgot their stops. Families of AS-271 texted each other links with hands that shook and steadied. Pilots messaged pilots, divers messaged divers. A TV producer mispronounced QAR and then learned. AmeriSky issued a new statement by noon, more specific and less soothing. They confirmed that a supplemental data device had been temporarily installed on AS-271 for routine trend monitoring, and that the device had been assessed by an independent laboratory and found to be unrecoverable. Trinity Bay issued a denial that managed to sound like agreement. They had no record of any customer request to recover data that was not formally docketed, which is a way of saying if someone asked informally, it wasn't a customer. By afternoon, a junior senator from a coastal state whose voters had been moved by the vigils called for a hearing on transparency in post-accident evidence handling. The federal agency declined comment. which is comment. Maya ate a pretzel without tasting it, while Sloan fielded 36 TV requests and said no to almost all of them. "We're not the story," Sloan said. "The story is the story." Then the backlash came, dressed as concern. Pundits accused Maya of exploiting grief. Anonymous accounts suggested she had faked the video still, never mind that the pixel forensic specialist the paper paid had vouched for it. A media watchdog ran a column about the new journalism of insinuation. Maya read none of it, then all of it, then wished for the kind of soul that can't read at all. At 6 p.m., her phone rang. It was Rohan. "They're interviewing me tomorrow," he said, voice thin. "Corporate wants to know why I kept that work card. I didn't. I kept a copy because I thought someday, I don't know what I thought." "Do you want a lawyer?" Maya asked. "I want sleep," he said, "and for the truth, not to make me unemployed." An hour later, Mark with facilities texted a photo of a whiteboard sketch. A wiring diagram showing the mic in the forward bay, spliced into the portable unit. It was drawn on a napkin. The caption read, "Not standard, real." By 9 p.m., the families group, people who had taught themselves to be an institution, issued a statement requesting the docket be reopened. They were precise, disciplined, tired of being told to move on. One mother wrote to Maya privately, "If there was a second heartbeat down there, I need to know why you heard it and we didn't." At midnight, Maya walked to the river and sat on a bench that felt colder than the air. Daniel joined, carrying 2 coffees that had stopped pretending to be hot. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "I think we stepped on a wire connected to a lot of rooms. Rooms hate light," he said. "But the wiring diagram suggests they're connected." Her phone buzzed, another burner message, maybe the last. "Check Trinity Bay again." Unrecoverable was an adjective, not a verdict. A week later, a subpoena with teeth demanded Trinity Bay's archive logs for March-April 2011. The lab complied under protest. In the production was a single page nobody had meant to include, an internal email from a senior engineer cautioning that partial data from the auxiliary unit appears intact, including maintenance channel audio. Recommend immediate client consultation regarding disposition. The timestamp was April 1st, 2011. Unrecoverable indeed, until someone decided it was. AmeriSky announced a review by a law firm with a 3-name brand. The federal agency appointed an independent advisor to assess evidence handling procedures from that period, which is how agencies apologize without saying sorry. The family's hearing date was set. Reporters who had dragged Maya last week asked for quotes this week. She declined most. She went to see Iris to thank her and bought an expensive mask she couldn't quite afford to go diving, not to the crash site, but to remember what it means to move through a world that doesn't want you. She thought about the sentence that had scared everyone, the nervous laugh in the forward bay. She played it again one night when the city felt far. "If we go fishing," he had meant it as a macabre joke against the odds, the way humans say dumb things to keep their hands from shaking. The problem wasn't the sentence, the problem was the instinct to hide it. To decide the public couldn't hold 2 truths at once, that human fallibility lives in the same air as engineering brilliance, that accountability isn't a witch hunt, that grief doesn't end because a report has a cover. The hearing was quiet theater. Maya sat behind the families. The liaison from the video swore that he had only facilitated logistics. Cole from Trinity Bay swore that they had never suppressed recoverable evidence. Linda testified to the calibration logs. Iris held up her ratty notebook and read secondary faint ping, the way you read a name at a vigil. Daniel squeezed Maya's shoulder when the mother of the boy in the Mets cap said, "I don't want villains. I want the ground under my feet to stop moving." Procedurally, the outcome was modest. The docket reopened for limited review, recommendations to standardize handling of supplemental devices, a requirement that any non-certified data unit installed on an aircraft be formally logged, and if recovered after an incident, docketed. There were memos and trainings and the lesser poetry of checklists. The sky did not change. People did. Afterward, Maya walked by the river again. No bench this time, just motion. She called Rohan, who had kept his job, but not his illusions. She called Mark, who didn't pick up. She called her mother and let herself be asked if she was eating. Then she went home to the wall of index cards, now peeled down, the constellation disassembled. On her desk sat a box. Inside was a hand-drawn thank you card from the families, a paper crane, and a small orange key fob shaped like a cylinder. It beeped once, softly, the kind of toy you can buy at museum gift shops. It made her laugh out loud. She laughed until she cried. Truth, she thought, isn't the thing you find. It's what you can prove you found. She had proved enough to make rooms brighter. Not bright, but brighter. She opened the window a crack. The city's noise poured in like life. Somewhere a plane crossed invisible vectors toward a place where someone would be waiting with a sign, a hug, a cab, a story to tell. Above the water, a gull yelled at nothing. Below it, the river went on, carrying what it carries, patient as gravity, old as beeps.